Dating in the church right now is the worst, right? The men you find attractive are already married, or the guys who are single are just weird, or nobody is asking you out at all. Or you go to a church like mine where it's so big you never see the same people twice. And meanwhile, everybody in your life is telling you that church is the best place to meet a godly man. And sure, for some people that's true. But honestly, it might be one of the hardest places to find someone right now. And then on top of all of that, you're not even really supposed to be going to church to meet someone. You're supposed to be going for God and for community, right? So single women out here trying to be open to meeting someone while simultaneously feeling like they are going to be judged just for thinking about it in a church building. It is a lot. It is. And today we are going to talk about why it feels this way and what to actually do about it. Okay? So, if you are a single Christian woman in your late 20s, early 30s, late 30s, wherever you're at, who has been faithfully showing up to church, serving, growing, doing everything right, and you are still single and still confused about why, this video is for you. I don't want to discourage you or give you a watered down, everything happens in God's timing response that leaves you just feeling more alone than before you clicked play. But I want to explain what is actually happening, why it feels the way it feels, and what a more honest and productive perspective might look like going forward. Because the frustration is real. You look around on a Sunday and the single men are scarce, right? The ones who are there are either not pursuing anyone or pursuing someone that just got saved a few weeks ago. Not that there's anything wrong with that, or they're just plain weird, right? The ones who seem spiritually solid are either already taken or emotionally unavailable. And nobody in church leadership is actually talking about it directly because it's an awkward conversation that nobody wants to have from the pulpit, right? So let's have it here instead. Proverbs 24:26 says an honest answer is like a kiss on the lips. Sometimes the most loving thing is the truth. And so here is the honest conversation about why dating inside the church feels impossible right now and what to actually do with it, okay? Dating in the church is a real problem because, first of all, the pool is genuinely smaller than it used to be. It is. It's not your imagination, and it's definitely not a faith issue, okay? For a long time, the conversation around church and gender was that women significantly outnumbered men. And for decades, that was true. Back in 2000, women were outpacing men in weekly attendance 47% to 38%. But here's where it really gets interesting because that's actually flipped. As of 2025, 43% of men and 36% of women now report attending church regularly. So on paper, it looks like great news for single women in the church, right? More men are showing up. The problem is they're not your men, okay? Researchers found that many single women feel discouraged by the dating pool at church because the men who are attending are often already married, right? So yes, the men are there. They're just already taken. Womp womp. Okay. This matters to name because a lot of women have quietly been internalizing this as a personal failure. And if I were more like this or less like that, or if I prayed more, harder, or trusted more, then the right men would appear, right? But sometimes the reason you have not met him at church is not spiritual, it's statistical. And releasing that false guilt is actually the first step toward thinking more clearly and more practically about where and how you are looking, okay? Dating in the church is also a problem because church culture has created some really confusing dating dynamics, right? This is something that does not get talked about enough, okay? The church environment, for all of its beauty and its community, has also produced some genuinely cute, confusing dating dynamics. There is this phenomenon of men who act like a spiritual leader, but are actually emotionally unavailable. There is this pressure to not get rejected that causes people to never actually communicate interest directly. And there's this let's be friends and pray about it approach that leaves people in indefinite emotional gray areas with men and women who will not call it a date and won't let it go either, right? There is also the reality that being in the same church or small group creates kind of social risk to pursuing someone that doesn't exist on a dating app. If he asks her out and she says no, they still see each other on Sunday. And that social cost is real. And it makes a lot of men hesitant in ways that wouldn't exist in a different context. None of this is anyone's fault exactly, but it is worth naming because understanding why the dynamic is complicated helps you to stop taking it personally. Dating in the church is also a real problem because spiritual maturity and emotional maturity are not the same thing. Am I right? The church is very good at producing men who know their Bible, who can lead a small group discussion, who use the same language about faith and calling and purpose. It is a little less effective at producing men who have done the genuine emotional work and relational work, who have examined their attachment patterns, who have sought counseling or mentorship around emotional health, who understand what it means to be present and vulnerable and accountable in an intimate relationship. Vice versa, it could be said for women too. And so you end up with more men and women who are spiritually articulate but emotionally unavailable. Men who can quote Ephesians 5 about loving your wife as Christ loved the church, but have never actually looked at what that requires from them emotionally and relationally. Okay? James 2:17 says, faith without works is dead. Spiritual knowledge without the emotional and relational work to back it up is the same thing in a different context. Okay, dating in the church is also a real problem because the church is telling you that you should always give him a chance, right? Have you ever been told that? Some church cultures today, not all, but some, have inadvertently taught women that the godly response to any Christian man who shows interest is to just give him a chance. And on the surface, that sounds humble and open-hearted, but what it has actually produced is a generation of women who are going on dates with men they are not attracted to, talking themselves into connections that are not there, and feeling guilty for not being able to manufacture feelings that God never put there in the first place. So here's what not many people are saying from the pulpit. Attraction matters. It does. It is not the only thing, and it is certainly not the most important thing, but it is a real and legitimate part of a romantic relationship, and you are allowed to need that. You do not have to go on a second date with someone just because he loves Jesus and asks nicely, okay? Loving Jesus is a baseline requirement, not the reason to override everything else your heart and your gut are telling you. The scarcity mindset is what drives this, really. When the pool feels small, every Christian man who shows interest can start to feel like an opportunity you can't afford to pass up. And so you talk yourself into it. You go on dates. You pray that feelings will come eventually, right? And at the end of it, you're emotionally drained. He's confused, and neither of you is closer to what you actually need. Another reason why dating in the church is a real problem today is because singleness in the church can feel like a waiting room. Yeah. Despite all of the progress that has been made in how the church talks about singleness, if you are a woman in your late 20s and 30s, there is a good chance that you still feel like you're in a waiting room. Like your real life starts when the relationship starts. Like you're in a transitional season rather than a full and valid one. And that feeling, even when it is unspoken and unintentional, it shapes how you show up in dating. It creates an urgency. It creates a desperation that you are trying very hard to hide. And it makes the pool feel even smaller because every interaction carries more weight than it should because you need it to go somewhere else. So here's a perspective shift for you. Here's what I want you to take away from this. The fact that dating inside the church feels hard right now is not evidence that God has forgotten you. It is not evidence that something is wrong with you, so stop thinking that. And it is not evidence that you need to lower your standards or settle for the first available Christian man who shows interest. Please don't do that, because it is evidence that you are navigating something that is genuinely complicated. It's a cultural moment, a statistical reality, and a set of dynamics that the church is still figuring out how to address honestly. So here's a practical takeaway that I want you to take. I want you to expand where you are looking without compromising what you are looking for. If the pool at your specific church is genuinely small, that is not a reason to abandon your standards. It is a reason to maybe expand where you're looking. Other churches, Christian conferences and events, faith-based community organizations, right? Yes, even Christian dating apps, if used with intention and discernment, okay? The goal is not to find a husband in your church, okay? The goal is to be available wherever God has planned for you to meet your husband, okay? I want you to stop waiting to be found and start moving with intention, okay? There is a version of trusting God that looks a lot like passivity, right? Just sitting and waiting, not putting yourself in new environments, not being willing to be visible and available in new places because you're worried about what that might look like and what it means about your faith. But think about Ruth, okay? Ruth did not meet Boaz staying at home. She went out into the field. She showed up. She was visible, and Boaz noticed her. Ruth 2:2 says, "Let me go out to the fields and pick the leftover grain." Ruth asked for permission to go somewhere new and do something intentional. Lastly, I want you to bring your frustration to God honestly. And when you pray about it, don't give God the pretty version, okay? Don't show up with this polished little pretty prayer where you say all the right things about trusting his timing and while you're actually really falling apart on the inside because he already knows what's really going on, okay? He knows what's in your heart and he is not impressed by some performance, okay? Psalm 62:8 says, "Pour out your hearts to him, for God is our refuge." Tell him what you are actually afraid of when you are being honest with yourself at 2:00 in the morning. Tell him the parts of you or of this that feel unfair. He can handle every bit of it. And more than that, he wants to hear it. Okay. Dating inside the church is hard right now. I know this is real and you are allowed to say so, but hard does not mean hopeless. The God who created you, who knows you completely, who has been faithful in every part of your life, he has not checked out on this one, okay? He sees you in this season. He is not withholding good things from you, and he is more than capable of writing your love story and the story of your life that exceeds anything you could have ever engineered for yourself. So I want you to keep your standards. I want you to step out of your comfort zone, and I want you to move with intention and trust the one who has never been late. And I want you to share this with someone who may need to hear it today and subscribe for more Christian content like this. I also want you to remember that you are worthy, loved, and chosen. And I hope you have a blessed week.